Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you as well. And Senator, we've got a lot to chat about on today's show, including more shocking news coming out of China.
Well, we're going to talk about Chinese communist espionage directed here at the United States, efforts to blackmail and to compromise U.S. politicians, efforts to spy here in the United States, efforts to target U.S. military bases with China buying farmland. It is a concentrated assault on the United States. I've said for a long time that standing up to communist China poses the single greatest geopolitical threat facing the United States for the next 100 years. We're going to break down some of the details of that. We're also going to take a victory lap right now. Last podcast we did 2 days ago, we talked about how Abdul El-Sayed was speaking at a conference alongside an Islamic Pakistani cleric known for his pedophilic rhetoric, known in particular for advocating marrying off his 13-year-old niece and urging others to marry their young children, family members, to adult men. Well, it turned out that the criticism Al-Sayed took was too much. And so the conference, by the way, the conference was organized by a group that his father-in-law helped found. The conference canceled the pedophile cleric. Now, mind you, they have other zealots on the program, and Al-Sayed is still speaking, but they decided maybe we should hide the Islamist pedophile at least between now and Election Day. We're going to give you the details of that as well. And finally, the DNC has now adopted as part of its platform, abolish ICE. They can't claim this is the DSA. They can't claim this is the communist. This is the Democrat National Committee. They voted unanimously that abolish ICE is their policy. We're going to give you the facts on that one, too.
Yeah, truly, truly incredible there. I want to also ask many of you to join us in doing something that is changing someone's life. If you're going to change someone's life, by the way, then you want to know that it also actually lasts. And that's one reason Compassion International has become one of the most trusted child development ministries in the world. Independent research shows children sponsored through Compassion stay in school longer. They're 40% more likely to graduate high school. That's phenomenal. And they're 80% more likely to finish college. That's because sponsorship isn't just temporary relief. It's a long-term investment through the local church. They're meeting the physical needs while sharing the hope of Jesus. And you can join me and so many others in making a true difference. For $43 a month, you can literally help shape a child's future. All you have to do is sponsor a child today at compassion.com. That's compassion.com. Senator, it's interesting how much we talk about China on this show because it just shows you at the level that China is playing the political game to have influence over the entire world. We see it with how they have gotten so far ahead on AI infrastructure, how far ahead they've gotten with just intelligence and spying. We've talked about that as well on this show. And we've seen it with them infiltrating our universities. And now we have this news story that's just another example that China is trying to play in every single sector.
Well, and there are multiple pieces that have broken recently, one of which concerns our old friend Eric Swalwell, the radical left-wing congressman who resigned in disgrace in the middle of his campaign to be governor of California. And he resigned because there were multiple allegations of his sexually harassing, even potentially sexually assaulting young women. But let's not forget about one of the early Swalwell scandals, which is his affair with Chinese spy Fang Fang. Now, at the time, Swalwell denied that he had the affair, said it didn't happen, it wasn't true. He denied it vehemently. Well, now it's been confirmed, and he's admitted, well, yes, in fact, they did have an affair. And let me read to you from the New York Post. Here's what the New York Post has covered. Quote, suspected Chinese honeypot Fang Fang solicited illegal campaign donations for Eric Swalwell, FBI found. A 3-year FBI probe into then Representative Eric Swalwell determined suspected Chinese spy Fang Fang helped solicit illegal campaign donations. But the investigation was dropped for, quote, national security reasons, according to the Bureau files declassified by the White House Monday. An undercover operation targeted the California Democrat between May of 2014 and May of 2017. By the way, May of 2014 to May of 2017, I will point out the president then was someone named Barack Obama. So this was not a political targeting. This was the Department of Justice who was looking at someone who was believed to be a corrupt congressman. They received a tip that, quote, internships in Congressman Eric Swalwell's offices were promised in exchange for campaign contributions, according to a June 10th, 2014 FBI memo. Quote, as part of the scheme to purchase internships, campaign contributions were conduited through third parties to mask the true identity of the donor, and in some cases made by foreign nationals in violation of federal criminal laws, noted the memo. FBI agents conducted interviews with Swalwell, unidentified campaign donors, and others in the congressman's orbit, but were unable to substantiate the quid pro quo allegations. However, the investigation did uncover evidence that Fang, who also went by Christine Fang, broke the law by soliciting illegal straw donations from foreign nationals, destroyed records, made false statements, smuggled cash, and acted as an unregistered foreign agent, presumably for China, according to a May 2nd, 2017 Bureau memo.
Now, by the way, before you keep going, let's go back to one of the points that you just made there in that article, and it was about the straw donations. People, I don't think, understand what happened here, and this was her basically finding people to give donations, and then she was reimbursing them after they gave their donations to Eric Swalwell, which, by the way, is like incredibly, massively against the law.
Well, A, you can't solicit or receive campaign donations from foreign nationals. You can't take money from Chinese communists. B, you can't take straw donations. You can't solicit them. You can't give them. You can't receive them. A straw donation is where I say, hey, Ben, why don't you give $1,000 to Joe Biden? And if you give $1,000, I'll give you the $1,000, and you say it's from Ben Ferguson. That is illegal, and if we do that, you and I have both committed a federal crime. And by the way, if the Biden administration knew about it, they have also broken the law. So that was what the investigation was, is that basically she was funneling money from the Chinese Communist government into Swalwell's campaign. Well, the facts of how they targeted him is interesting. So Fang's parents were, quote, known intelligence officers in China's Ministry of State Security, and she maintained ties to other affiliates of that agency, which Swalwell jokingly referred to as the, quote, Chinese CIA in an interview with the FBI.
Incredible.
And so Swalwell admitted to investigators that he had, quote, hooked up with Fang at least twice at his apartment. So he's admitting it.
Yeah.
Once when he let her in after having taken an Ambien to help him sleep, after which he said he barely recalled the tryst. Now that is about as believable as nothing. You know, I was just at home minding my own business. I went to sleep, and suddenly a Chinese spy showed up, and we had sex together. But I don't even remember that. Gosh, I forgot that altogether.
Gets you every time, right? That Ambien just right before sex with a random Chinese spy.
A former Swalwell campaign aide confirmed to FBI agents that Fang was, quote, very flirtatious, and had even boasted to the congressman, quote, that she was not wearing any underwear when arriving at his doorstep unannounced for one of their liaisons. Swalwell's links to Fang led then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to remove him from the Intelligence Committee in January 2023, so not that long ago, citing the fact that he was having a relationship with a Chinese spy. The congressman told the Bureau agents that a significant portion of his Bay Area constituents were Chinese Americans, and he explained that diversity is important when discussing Fang's almost monthly visits to his office. So he was just engaged in like diversity and youth outreach. The report says, quote, the only difference between Fang and other organizational contexts was that Swalwell and Fang occasionally hooked up, and Fang had a thing for him. A report of a March 4th, 2016 interview describes Swalwell saying. So that's out of his own mouth.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is part of a larger pattern. Here's another article from the New York Post entitled, Chinese Communists are infiltrating the U.S. by honey-trapping spies, duping Pauls, buying farmland, and more. Chinese Communist Party spies, schools spreading their propaganda and influence, campaigns against politicians are rife across the United States. In just the past week, before President Trump landed for a summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, The mayor of Arcadia, California, Eileen Wang, a Democrat, resigned after pleading guilty to working as a foreign agent for China. In New York, Liu Harry Jin Wang, a Chinatown community leader, was convicted in Brooklyn federal court for operating a secret Chinese Communist Party police station, by the way, in the United States, in Brooklyn. Meanwhile, Chinese divorcee Changli Sophia Luo was charged with blackmailing the billionaire owner of a basketball team. Luo, who allegedly attempted to shake down Milwaukee Bucks owner Wes Edens for more than $1 billion,
Wow.
was arrested after booking a flight to Hong Kong, then being bailed out of jail by Robin Mu, a Chinese foreign agent, according to court papers. She has pleaded not guilty. This pattern is far-reaching, and here's what Kevin Hecht, a retired FBI agent who spent 20 years investigating Chinese counterintelligence, said, quote, "This is just the tip of the iceberg." If you look at their pattern is, number one, honey trapping. So AMC cinema boss Adam Aaron fell victim to one of these traps, while actor Jeremy Renner has fought back against claims from a Chinese filmmaker, Li Zhuo, who said he sent her nudes and threatened to have her deported, claims that Renner denies. Suspicions of honey trapping. The Biden administration prevented any U.S. government officials in China from having sex with Chinese women. Trump has continued the same prohibition. This pattern is far-reaching. Wang, who was the mayor who was resigned after it became clear that she was a Chinese spy, faces up to 10 years in prison for promoting Chinese propaganda in the U.S. and promoting the Communist Party's interest. She and her handler and co-conspirator, Yaoning Mike Sun, promoted People's Republic of China content on a website they created aimed at the local Chinese community from 2022 to 2024, according to plea deals they both reached with U.S. prosecutors. So this was not a long time ago. This was 2022 to 2024. Other influence operations are more subtle, such as that of Linda Sun, the former director of Asian American Affairs for New York ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo, and a top aide to his successor, Governor Kathy Hochul, is accused of forging Hochul's signature on official letters in an attempt to steer state policy in favor of Chinese national interests. Her case ended up in a mistrial last year. Quote, "If a group in Long Island was going to have a Taiwan Day, it was her job to make sure that it fell through and the governor would not recognize it," Hecht told the Post. Sun also allegedly encouraged Hochul to film a Lunar New Year video advertising China's New York consulate, and told her handlers in a January 25th, 2021 letter that the then lieutenant governor, that would be Kathy Hochul, now the governor of New York, quote, "is much more obedient than the governor." That is the words of an alleged Chinese spy about the current Democrat governor of New York.
Wow. You see this and you put it all together, and it goes back to what I said at the very beginning. They're playing at a level in every different sector to have total world dominance, and not just, and I'm talking about intelligence, I'm talking about in business, I'm talking about in AI, I'm talking about having their tentacles everywhere. And one of the ways they've done it, we warned about the other day, Senator, was how they are controlling so many of our universities with massive donations and students that are coming over acting like they're students when really they're in the intelligence industry of the Chinese Communist Party. They're no different than CIA operatives.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. And by the way, Fang Fang was allegedly here on a student visa. She was allegedly here as a student. You know what is shocking? Do you know when she infiltrated Eric Swalwell's office?
When was that?
She developed, quote, extensive ties with Swalwell, starting when he was a Dublin City Council member, bundling donations for his 2014 re-election campaign and even recommending staff for his office. So I don't even know where Dublin City is, but apparently that's some California city where I guess he was a member of the city council. But look, to be honest, do you know where Dublin City is?
No.
If you asked me, I'd guess Ireland. I'd get that wrong.
Yeah.
So he's a Dublin City Council member, and they're sending a Chinese spy to infiltrate him. Here's a quote from Hecht, who was the 20-year FBI agent. Quote, "Nothing even makes me blink anymore," said Hecht. "If you are anybody in politics, China is going to send a Chinese woman to try to blackmail you." And I got to stop right now, Ben, and say I'm offended, because this is, if you're anybody in politics, I think I'm somebody. I mean, look, it wouldn't work, but I guess I'm a little offended that they're going after Democrat city council members. But I'm
Senator,
I'm a
they
little
just don't
boring.
know how to speak Constitution the way it would take. That they understand that the founding fathers are not the strong suit of the Chinese communist spies coming over. So I think you're safe.
I feel quite comfortable. Heidi and I celebrated our 25th anniversary this year, and I am blessed beyond words. As you know, my favorite toast in all of life is "God bless nearsighted women."
And that's a new
Heidi,
one. I like it. I like that.
Heidi does believe I'm 6'5" and blonde. Please do not dissuade her.
Yeah.
That's my story. It's worked for a quarter century, and I'm not changing it.
Yeah, I wouldn't change that one at all. It's incredible. We're going to keep covering this story because.
Well, and I want to mention one more thing that is significant.
Sure.
You were talking about the funding in universities, and since 2004, China funded Confucius Institutes at colleges that ostensibly taught Chinese language and culture classes. By 2020, there were 75 operating in the United States, 65 of which were active on university campuses. And these institutions, according to the American Association of University Professors in 2014, said the institutes, quote, "function as an arm of the Chinese state." Now, what they do is two things. Number one, they engage in propaganda on college campuses, pushing the propaganda and messaging from the Chinese Communist Party, doing things like trying to suppress any discussion of Tiananmen Square, trying to suppress discussions of Tibet, trying to suppress discussions of the genocide against the Uyghurs or the persecution and harvesting of the Falun Gong. All of that they engage actively in college campuses. They also engage in espionage, and the people at the Confucius Centers are spying in the colleges. Now, one of the very first pieces of legislation I ever authored and passed into law, this was during the Biden administration. I was on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I introduced legislation that would bar money from the Department of Defense for language training to any university that has a Confucius Center on campus. And that legislation got bipartisan support, actually got Democrats to support my legislation. We passed it out of the Armed Services Committee. We passed it out of the Senate, and Obama signed it into law. It resulted in dozens of Confucius Centers shutting down across the country. Today, the number of Confucius Institutes has dwindled to about 10. And so it's an example when you target and cut off the money, you can make a real difference fighting back against this Chinese propaganda and espionage. On August 25th, my brand new book comes out, Going Further, The Incomparable Clarence Thomas. It tells the story of Justice Thomas, one of the true American heroes, an incredible story. It's based on 9.5 hours of one-on-one exclusive interviews with Justice Thomas. Justice Thomas also joins us for Verdict with Ted Cruz, a one-on-one podcast to tell his story, both his life story and his incomparable jurisprudence. You can pre-order it right now at the website goingfurther.com. Goingfurther.com. Click on the link now and pre-order the book today.
I want to move to our victory lap because we put a lot of capital into exposing the next story, and it seems to have had a real impact in forcing the radical Democrats to actually backpedal a little bit. Let's talk about that.
Well, we talked about in the last podcast on Monday how Abdul El-Sayed, the radical Islamist communist who is the Democrat nominee for Senate in Michigan, how he was scheduled to speak at a conference organized by the Islamic Society of North America, which his father-in-law, by the way, his father-in-law is also the single largest donor to Al-Sayed Super PAC, had helped organize. And at this conference, Al-Sayed was going to speak, and also a radical Pakistani cleric who advocates, who, number one, admitted to forcing his 13-year-old niece into marriage, and advocates pedophilia and incest, advocates people marrying off their young family members as young as 13 or even younger. And we pointed out on Monday's pod how Al-Sayed did not dispute any of that. He didn't deny any of that, but his defense was, he said, well, yes, we're speaking at the same conference, but I'm on a different panel. I'm not on the panel with him. I'm speaking at the identical conference organized by the same people to the same audience, but we're technically on stage at a different time. Well, it turned out this podcast and other places, to be fair, other places also focused on it. That heat proved a problem because he is trying to dupe the voters of Michigan into thinking that he's not a radical Islamist who thinks pedophilia is a good idea. And so the organization, again, that his father-in-law helped found, the Islamic Society of North America, removed the Pakistani cleric from its speaker roster. So sorry, pedophile-promoting cleric, you're no longer on the roster. Al-Sayed is still speaking at this conference. And so they responded to heat by trying to cover up the affiliation. Now, do you know who was also speaking at the conference that they haven't removed?
Who's that?
A cleric named Yasser Qadhi, who has called the Holocaust a hoax. So, to the best I know, the cleric Qadhi doesn't call for pedophilia, doesn't call for marrying off your 13-year-old nieces, but he insists that the Holocaust is a hoax, and I assume when Al-Sayed is asked about it, I'm imagining he won't admit that he thinks the Holocaust is a hoax, although I suspect he probably does. But I imagine his defense is going to be the same. I'm on a different panel, not my fault. Let me just say to all the listeners of Verdict, your voices matter. Because a lot of you listened to Monday's podcast. You were outraged, and you did something important. You shared the podcast, you posted it on Facebook, you tweeted it out, you emailed it to friends. You drew attention to it, and it put enough heat to cause a change, to cause a retreat. And so I just want to credit the incredible listeners of Verdict. You guys are powerful, and keep at it. We're going to keep shining the light of truth on the insanity that is happening all around us.
And by the way, Senator, that's not all we have to bring listeners about Al-Sayed. You've got even another story which is also just as shocking.
That's exactly right. Just when you think this guy could not get more radical, you discover more facts. So Abdul El-Sayed's mother, we talked about his sister on Monday, who's a radical and America-hating. She's a professor at University of Chicago who hates the University of Chicago, has said that repeatedly. She hates America. She hates Thanksgiving. She hates the 4th of July. She is a rabid, bigot, Jew hater, Islamist, America hater. She's a communist. Well, you start to wonder, where did Abdul get his views? Where did his sister get his views? And then you look at their family. Abdul El-Sayed's mother helped process tens of thousands of dollars in overseas transfers for an Islamic charity that was later convicted of secretly funneling $1.375 million into Saddam-era Iraq and was blacklisted over alleged Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and Hamas ties. The name of the charity was IRA USA, the American office of the Sudan-based ISRA network. In 2004, Treasury blacklisted the global network, alleging that its officials supported Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and the Taliban. And El-Sayed's mother processed tens of thousands of overseas transfers to this Islamic charity. You wonder why he supports the Islamists who are enemies of America. Well, he was raised on it. He was raised on hate as a child, which is why he expresses that hate. It's why his sister expresses that hate. And it's why I don't believe the people of Michigan are going to vote for their next senator to be someone who hates them and hates America.
And by the way, if you thought it was just the Democratic Socialists of America that are really getting their mojo, I guess now the DNC is trying to say, no, we're just as radical as you are. with a new stance that the Democratic National Committee, just when you thought they might try to like dial it down a little bit, the crazy, they have now changed their platform to say, hold on, we're all in on abolishing ICE, making sure they don't exist anymore.
Well, and there's some Democrat politicians who pretend, oh, this is an extreme view. It's only by the radicals, the DSA, the communists and socialists in our party, although they won't admit they're communists and socialists in their party. It's not the rest of us normal Democrats. Well, this past week, the DNC was meeting in Austin, Texas, sadly in our home state, and the DNC adopted a resolution urging congressional Democrats to abolish ICE. And the abolition measure, it was known as Resolution 27, it cleared the DNC's resolution committee in a 25-12 vote with one abstention. It headed to the full membership. It was bundled into a larger package, and it was approved by the full membership. What do you think the vote was?
Well, I'm assuming, knowing the Democratic Party and radical as they are, it was probably a very high success rate.
Unanimous.
There you go.
Every single person voted yes. The vote's non-binding. It doesn't formally change the party's platform for 2028, but the DNC has now voted for a resolution saying abolish ICE. And understand what abolish ICE means. ICE is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. It is the agency that tracks down illegal immigrants inside the interior of the United States. It tracks down gangbangers. It tracks down MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. It tracks down murderers and child rapists and human traffickers. And the position now adopted unanimously by the DNC is the Democrats want to abolish it. If you abolish ICE, it means you are no longer willing to enforce our immigration laws. It means you want the illegal immigrants in America to stay here. By the way, with no ICE, nobody gets deported. Like once you get in, you stay here forever with no ICE. With no ICE, the criminal gangbangers who are illegals, they're not prosecuted, they're not arrested. By the way, the over 300,000 children that the Biden administration had in federal custody that they handed over to adults and then lost. And many of those adults were not family members. They don't know where they are. The Trump administration, one of the most important things they've done is they've gone and tracked down thousands upon thousands of those kids and gotten them out of situations where they're facing the potential for abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. The position of the Democrats is, to heck with those kids, leave them where they are. We're not going to enforce. We're not going to investigate. We're not going to do anything because, look, abolish ICE is the immigration version of abolish the police. And we've talked a lot on this pod about how radicalized the Democrats have gotten. This is no longer the fringe. This is the unanimously adopted resolution position of the entire Democrat National Committee. That means even the most supposedly moderate Democrat, their party's position is get rid of ICE altogether.
And Senator, final question on this. You look at the pushing here by the left to force, I think it's pretty darn clear, the Democratic Party to just become more and more extreme. Will there be pushback, or is this them just admitting, hey, stick with us, we're going to where you are in the Democratic Socialists, or do you believe that voters are going to say, Democratic Party, you've gone too far?
Well, look, I hope so. That's what the midterms are going to determine, at least as an initial push. I hope the voters say, listen, I don't want unlimited illegal immigrants in our country. I don't want criminals released. I don't want ICE abolished. I don't want the police abolished. I want to lock up criminals and bad guys. Here's what the White House said. A White House spokeswoman, Lauren Biss, said the following this weekend, quote, extreme radical Democrats want to abolish ICE and defund the police. Instead of trying to abolish ICE, Democrats should be thanking ICE law enforcement officers for putting their lives on the line to arrest and remove murderers, rapists, pedophiles, and gang members from American communities. Many of these criminals were released from jails by Democrat radical politicians. President Trump's effort to remove criminal illegal aliens from American communities is already delivering results, including the lowest murder rate in 125 years. That's a profound record of success, but look, elections are about making the case to the American people. So I hope all of the Republicans on the ballot make the case that producing extraordinary results in immigration, seeing illegal border crossings drop 99%, producing 20% drops in the murder rates and 20% drops in the deaths from drug overdoses, that is saving the lives of literally thousands of Americans. That's a record of success. And the Democrats are saying, don't just go back to Joe Biden era. Listen, when Biden was president, we had ICE. We had not abolished the police, although Democrats in cities had slashed the funding of a number of police departments. The Democrat position now is go further than Biden. They don't just want open borders. They want to release violent criminals. And I got to say, I don't think that's where most Americans are. I think if you talk to your average American citizen, a Republican, yes, but also an independent or even most Democrats, and ask them, do you want to release murderers and rapists into your community? It is only the extreme zealots who would say yes. That used to be a position that was a bipartisan, like obvious duh position. Today, the Democrats are being driven by their zealots, and the rest of the party is terrified of those zealots. And so between now and Election Day, we need to make the case to the voters, and I hope every candidate does so. I can tell you on this podcast, we're certainly going to lay out the facts and make the case that we should be protecting American citizens and not releasing violent criminal illegal aliens into the United States. I think that's basic common sense. I think that's where most Americans are.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Don't forget, we do the show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto download button wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss a single episode. And the Senator and I will see you back here on Friday morning.